There are two words I just cannot stand: poor and broke. Every time I see videos online, they're telling you all these things that are keeping you poor and broke, but they're leaving out these critical things that I'm going to tell you in this video. My name is Maoli Vodi with Financially Present, and I've spent the last 16 years as a stockbroker, a financial consultant, and then even a capital planning investment controls subject matter expert. So I've seen a lot on the personal level all the way to the federal level. And anytime I see something online about the habits that are keeping people poor, or why people are poor, things that are keeping people in the middle class, it says a lot of things that you hear over and over again. You got to read books. You need to budget. You need to do this. You need to do that. And at the end of the day, they are leaving out so much more. And in this video, I'm going to break it down for you, starting with number one. You're following too many voices. It is extremely difficult, especially now with the way social media is and the internet is, because you look at things online and you don't know whether or not someone is an actual industry expert, or are they just an influencer? Are they somebody that's being paid by endorsements, or do they have expertise and wisdom over the last several years in that subject? And it gets confusing, and it's hard for people to really observe what's the real, what's the fake. Like, at some point, you just get frustrated and you're just gonna back up and say, you know what? I'm just gonna keep myself safe and stay away from all these fraudsters because I don't know what their angle is. And that's the stance of a lot of people. When someone is trying to break away from the cycle of poverty or a pattern of just generational curses, the last thing they want is more confusion. I've sat down with so many people and I asked them, what are some investment areas you want to work with? Or what are some things you are interested in order to build wealth? And sometimes they're working on very basic things, but they jump straight into, they want to figure out how they can create a system like the Rockefellers did with the infinite banking. And it's basically using insurance products that they likely aren't familiar with and may not be fully comfortable with. And they use trusts. Another thing that's also part of an ecosystem that requires some money. And if you don't understand those things, it's very difficult to implement. And I understand when someone is trying to put a shoe on that does not fit. On that same note, there's other people that decide, hey, well, Maoli, I want to invest in cryptocurrency, or I want to day trade, and that's how I want to build my wealth. These are things that can be very, very off-putting for someone who's new to investing or someone who isn't sure, but because there's so much online, it's hard to filter that for some people. So there are too many voices, and I would say you need to limit them so that you can tune out that noise specifically and figure out where you are and how you can best fit in. Because there's a lot of things that are flashy and a lot of things that look good, but they may not be for you at this current stage. And that brings me to reason number two: lack of personal boundaries. This one, it really depends on your personality, because if you're someone who doesn't like to see people upset, or maybe you want to be a people pleaser, this is going to take a little extra work for you, but it pays to say no. You have to figure out how to create that boundary that will help protect you and get you into a situation where you can reach back and help. Because it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, hey, I don't have the money for that. I got the money for this, but I do not have the money for that. That is you setting up a boundary. I know it's going to take a lot of practice for some people too, but it's okay. And at the end of the day, it's okay to say, hey, I can't go out tonight, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. These are some of those small, slight things that could be holding you back when a simple no could propel you forward. And that actually leads me to something that's a little bit harder to control, and that's number three: where you live. People hate to admit it, but where you live matters. There's a difference in living in California or New York or the DC metropolitan area, and it literally does not compare to other areas of the nation. So when you see someone online, on YouTube, it could be me, it could be anyone, it has to fit your situation, because the lifestyle here in Northern Virginia is different than rural Virginia, and we're literally in the same state. And no one wants to talk about this online. Where you live does matter. The resources are different. The education required to thrive and propel your future is different. And not just only within a state, but within the country. And you can see it in other parts of the world. And reading a book is not going to change where I live. moving, getting out of where I live is what's going to change that. So there's so much that comes into play. And I know for me, it was going to college out of state is what propelled me into a different direction. And yes, I could have accomplished some of the same things where I was, but my eyes were open a little bit differently when I moved into a different area. In areas where education is much higher, then the pay generally is higher. So it can't compare to an area where it's very rural and maybe the local factory is out of business, or maybe the union has to go on strike in order to get higher pay. Like there are big differences, and it doesn't matter where your Amazon packages get shipped. At the end of the day, if you're getting a book shipped to a certain area and it's an area without enough resources, we can read the same exact book and you and I will have different results. And that brings me to the next thing. Number 4, no system in place. And some others have touched on things like this, but it's a little bit different because a system doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to be something that's very intricate or something that looks fancy on a computer or on your phone. It could be something as simple as saying, hey, when I get paid on this date, I will put some money to the side for me for savings. I will pay all my bills immediately, and I'll have fun with the rest. That's essentially a system because it's going to happen over and over again, and it has a pattern. And if you can rely on it, it is a system. Now, I know systems are extremely important, but not as big as this next point that I want to bring up, and that's not dealing with your past. Yes, there are a lot of problems in your past that have everything to do with how you use your finances. And it's really the big elephant in the room that people don't like to address, but there's a lot to be said about how you were raised with money. I mean, I know personally there are people who have grown up with their credit being used by someone else. They've had to work and provide for family all the way from the age of 14 to them being full adults now. So the money mindset that they have is completely different than someone who didn't have to do that. And that plays a big factor into how they feel. And it is what keeps them broke. It keeps them poor. I know there are specific people that, their money situation was so bad to the point that now that they do make money, their sole intent is to make sure that they never see scarcity again. So they accumulate a lot of things, they have a hard time parting with things, and they make sure that they surround themselves with things so that they don't ever have to even be remotely related to scarcity. And that has a lot to do, that has a lot to do with how they treat money going forward. They can't see past the physical, tangible. So things like investing or paying it forward, there are a lot of things that take a back seat because of these particular money mindsets. And I would challenge you to just address those issues from the past and see how it's affecting you, because it's heavy to carry. And that type of baggage, you will literally break your bag, dragging all them bags like that. And that brings me to my last point. Poor is relative. There are levels to this. There's lower class, middle class, and so many levels within those. And one level of quote unquote poor is different than another. And I recently came across something online where a young lady mentioned she got a uniform for her job, and some people were concerned when they saw her the second day, and they gave her a new uniform. And then a few days later, she brought in her regular uniform she was wearing, and they gave her another one. And they were concerned, and they had to pull her to the side. Long story short, she had been drying her uniform in the oven. And I felt like I didn't grow up with much, but not to the point where I would dry my clothes in the oven. And honestly, I would think most people would just hang dry it. But I didn't grow up having to use the oven to heat the home, thank God. I didn't have to use it as a dryer. We had meals every night. We had 2 loving parents that cared for us and worked almost too hard, to the point that, well, sometimes we didn't always get to see them, but it was for a particular reason. And for me as a child, I probably thought we didn't have much, but we had so much more in comparison to other levels of that class of life that we were living. And I would say that was lower middle class. And at the end of the day, the way you measure it is going to be different. And a book is not always going to help. A lot of it has to do with your surroundings. It has to do with your people that you're around, the people that you have to help out. Some of it is related to not having systems. And at the end of the day, if you don't have these type of things around you, yes, they are going to be a factor for sure. If you are planning on changing your financial situation and you're looking for a fresh start, I want to make sure that you get your start with this free 10 crucial steps to being financially present. And you can find that right below this video. Catch you on the next one.